Hi, welcome to take number th. This video is reviewing A Houseboat on the Styx by, okay, let's see if I can get this in closer, John Kendrick Bangs. This book was first published in 1895. And despite appearances, this book, while it's lived its absolute best book life, is not a first edition. It's an 11th edition. But with all that, it has suffered. The original title was A Houseboat on the Styx, being some account of the diverse doings of the associated shades. And obviously the publishers wanted to chop that down a little bit, probably because there wasn't enough room on the cover. This one, like the original, I believe, edition, has got these wonderful plate illustrations in it. Illustrations that were done by an artist called Peter Newell, who also did illustrations for Punch and who wrote his own books. Apparently he was known for children's book illustrations, but some of this artwork is amazing. It's not the sort of artwork you'd see in a new book, but because I think you would consider, some people would consider it quite clunky, and some of the illustrations are better than others, but overall I think it makes a great accompaniment to this book. It's not a huge book. It is 171 pages and probably should be less than that. There's not a huge amount of copy on each page, and the pages of themselves are as thick as some short stories. It's just really, really heavy paper. So, why am I reading it? Well, I'm primarily reading it because a while back I saw a really good video on a YouTuber's channel. Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective, did this episode which they talked about Bangsian fantasy, of which I had not previously heard. But Bangsian fantasy started with John Kendrick Bangs, apparently, with this book. And it's a genre which concerns the use of afterlife as the main setting for the story. And so, of course, it is always fantasy. And this is an early fantasy book with a new setting that became its own genre. Now, in a 1980s guide to supernatural fiction, Bangs' most noteworthy achievement was this particular genre. And while that claims that he didn't invent the subgenre, he does claim that it gave it publicity and literary status. As I was hearing about this story, about the whole genre, it was kind of exciting because we may never have heard of Bangs, I never had, but we've all heard of this genre. Over there on my to read shelf is Riverworld by Philip Jose Farmer from 1971. Which is very much got this theme and apparently is a direct tribute to this work which Farmer had read. There's many other ones, and it's gone into movies as well. What Dreams May Come, Robin Williams' movie, is very much the same thing. And my personal favourite, the more recent The Good Place, which is set in the afterlife. I love that series. I've even got off my high horse of reading, not watching, to watch the whole thing more than once. What Dreams May Come, by the way, wasn't originally written as a movie score. It was originally written by Richard Matheson, who also wrote The Invisible Man and I Am Legion. Interesting side note. This video is full of side notes. So there I am, watching away Daisy Ex Machina's video, and I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds really cool. I might look for it, I might read it, which I have now done. But as I was listening in, I found another of those Gordian knot tie-ins, because what she was describing sounded really, really similar to a comic that I'd read recently. Now, I don't review comics very often because I think they need pictures and I don't know how to do that stuff. But a ways back, there was this really excellent and I thought fantastical but well written and beautifully drawn comic series called Promethea by Moore, and that's Alan Moore, by the way, and J.H. Williams. It ran for a long time. It had 2 seasons. And in the second season, Promethea actually goes into the underworld to look for a character who died. And one of the first experiences that she has there is Karen tells the boatman, takes her across. She is asking him about her friend Barbara, who died. And there's some difficulties since Promethea wasn't actually technically dead, but she does eventually get taken to where Barbara went to, which was the Nancy Knox, the riverboat on the Styx. Sorry, the houseboat on the Styx. And there it is exactly like it's described by Bangs. It's like a private club, only this private club, unlike Bangs, allowed women in. Bangs notoriously didn't. So that was a really exciting tie-in. That is Promethea number 14, June 2001, by the way. River Moon. By now I was fully intrigued and I wanted to read this. So eventually, after years of keeping one eye open for it, not actually going out there on the internet and purchasing it, mind you, I don't do that very often, but this appeared in the wild, I got it, I read it. It's an easy read. Despite looking really, really chunky, that's mainly because each piece of paper is worth about 5 modern pieces of paper. It's 171 pages long, but as you can see, the writing doesn't occupy the whole page, and it's not what you'd call immensely challenging to read. It's nice enough. I think overall I'd rate it 2 stars for enjoyment, but throw in an extra star there purely for the kudos of popularizing Bangsian genre and concept-wise. We start with, in the first chapter, a houseboat on the Styx. Its subtitle, as they did in the day, is Karen Makes a Discovery. I'm not sure, by the way, how to say Karen's name. Karen, the ferryman of renown, was cruising slowly along the Styx one pleasant Friday afternoon not long ago. And then he sees this other boat and gets grumbly about it because, valuable as is my franchise, I never corrupted a public official in my life. And early on, we discover that the writing is very, very tongue-in-cheek. Karen sounds pretty much like a seaman or a sailor or whatever you want to call them. It's so tongue-in-cheek that I actually wondered and went and I checked it out. Mark Twain, if you've ever read Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, I feel like that story or that type of writing was directly contributed to this book's style of writing. Now, I don't love A Connecticut Yankee. I never actually managed to finish it, to be honest. I've read some of Twain's other writings, but that slapstick humor and the inability to write anything historical bothered me in the King Arthur's Court, and occasionally it bothered me in the houseboat on the Styx, because the houseboat on the Styx is quite short. I could get around it, but essentially there are no characters in this. Bangs has a whole heap of historical individuals that are mentioned. So we've got Shakespeare, we've got Sir Walter Raleigh, we've got Queen Elizabeth, because you're not going to get Sir Walter Raleigh without Queen Elizabeth. There's Dr. Johnson, Adam makes an appearance, so does Noah. Which is where we see that while modern Bangsian genre tends to concentrate on people who are dead, Bangs concentrates on immortals. Apparently some people who have lived and contributed to mankind become immortals and some don't. Whereas you've got others like Mars and Jupiter, who are described in not very complimentary terms, who have always been immortal and don't understand a human who's had to work for their place. So yeah, if you like the writing style in the Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, I think you'll probably love this one as well. I didn't love the writing style, but it was bearable, and I could read it bit by bit, like a short story at a time. And a short story at a time pretty much is what this is. Each chapter has its own theme. So in one chapter they They discuss the possibility of having a ladies' day because Sir Walter Raleigh has said that Queen Elizabeth has expressed a desire to see a club. As per the 1880s, this is a men's club, no women allowed, blah, blah, blah. So the discussion never eventuates to anything. Most of these discussions don't. You've got a storyteller's night, where no stories are actually told, though we see a nice little fight between Wellington and Napoleon. It's very name-dropping. So you've got a lot of characters who have their names dropped. And for the modern reader who doesn't read a lot of fiction from the era, I'm just glad that I had Google and ChatGPT next to me while I was reading this, because I had to Google constantly. I didn't really know who Baron Munchausen was, though now I'm intrigued to read about him. And there's small things, like Baron Munchausen features heavily as a teller of tall tales, which is fine. But Munchausen isn't a dead character, he's a literary character. And the guy who wrote him, Rudolf Erich Raspy, from 1785, he isn't included. Though that did add another to my to-read list, because now I would like to read about Baron Munchausen in the original. There's also a really interesting chapter as to cookery and sculpture, in which two interchangeable characters, I think one of them might be Burns. Not sure. Dr. Johnson maybe. He appears a lot. They're discussing how sad it is that cooks aren't ever made immortal. Because apparently cooks don't have what it takes to be immortal. And I found that chapter immensely amusing, since in this day and age, of course, celebrity chefs are a huge business and a huge thing. But these two characters are discussing what it would take to make a cook immortal. And then we go on to sculpture, and that's a whole different kettle of fish, if you'll pardon the pun. Now, these people refer to themselves as shades, and anything that has been alive or real can apparently become a shade. William Shakespeare is in there, and Bangs seems to delight in constantly prodding the fact that Shakespeare, the notion that Shakespeare didn't write all of his own plays. If you listen to Bangs, you'll think that Shakespeare never wrote a single thing in his entire life, all of it attributed to other people, many of whom are here as well. Okay, there we go. Robert Burns and Homer were seated at a small table in the dining room of the houseboat, discussing everything in general, and the shade of a very excellent luncheon in particular. Because the meals are all shades of actual luncheons that occurred, though apparently the shades can eat them as if they were new. There's a lot of ducks. They eat a lot of ducks. Fair, I mean. The era is what it is. Okay, so I did make some notes as I was going along. I think I've covered most of those. Yes. So, a houseboat on the Styx. If not originator, then the popularizer of the notion of Bangsian Genera, which is very popular, has been used in many books. I'm now really keen to read Philip Jose Farmer's Riverworld series. And I do recommend to any person who likes comic books and has not, the Promethea book. It's very heavy on mysticism, but at least the first series has got a lot of action and it's a lot of fun to read. A lot of very beautiful artwork as well. And Promethea is arguably science fiction because it's set in a futuristic society where you've got things like airships and floating platforms as well as superheroes. Good series. Fascinating book. Thank you for watching. Read good books and have a great January 2025.